Hey guys, today we will be going over how to determine the value of unknown angles. Before we get to any problems, it is important for us to go over some definitions and some examples. Going over our definitions, we have parallel postulate, vertical angles, supplementary angles, congruent angles, and the relation between angles and triangles. Our parallel postulate states that if two parallel lines are cut by another line, then corresponding angles will have equal measures. We can see that in this example. We have our two parallel lines being cut by this one line. Corresponding angles have been color coded, so I can say that angle GEA corresponds with angle DAC. Both are purple. We can do the same for the orange. Angle FEA corresponds to angle BAC. Now, our vertical angles are just the angles opposite of each other when two lines cross. We have our two lines. Vertical angles are just those opposite of each other. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. Congruent angles have the same angle and degree, and under this category we can throw in vertical angles, alternate exterior angles, and alternate interior angles. Finally, with angles and triangles, we know that the sum of the angles within a triangle will always equal 180 degrees. Moving on to our supplementary angle example. Now, we know that these two angles must add up to 180 degrees. If we are given 60 degrees, then we know that this angle must be 120. Now, it doesn't matter which way this line is angled, these two angles will always add up to 180 degrees. Alternate exterior angles are always congruent, and those are just the angles that are opposite outside of each other. Alternate interior angles are always congruent, and those are just the opposite angles inside. Now, going on to our triangle example, we know that these three angles must equal 180 degrees. If we are given 50 and 65, we can add those two up to get 115, subtract that by 180, and our remaining angle is 65 degrees. Now, it's important to keep all this information in mind in order for us to find our unknown angles. Now, how do we go from here to here? Now, we have a bunch of unknown angles, but we are given a couple here. And we can use our definitions to solve this. We are given 50 degrees up here, and we know that vertical angles are congruent. This means that C must be 50 degrees as well. And in order to find B and D, we can use our definition of supplementary angles. We know that 50 and this angle must add up to 180. So this means that this angle will be 130 degrees. Same thing with this angle. This has to be 130 degrees. And now we can start working on the rest of our problem here. If we move down here, we can do the same thing we did at the top. If we have 60 degrees here, we know that this angle is vertical and congruent, so it must be 60 degrees. We can do the same for P and N, use our supplementary angle definition. We know that 60 plus a number has to equal 180. So we know that P and N must be 120 degrees. Now we can use our definition of alternate exterior angle and alternate interior angle to help us find some other angles here. Now, we know that our alternate exterior angles are congruent. So O and Q are the same. That must mean that Q is 60 degrees. Now, alternate interior angles, P and R are congruent. So that would give us 120 degrees for R. Now, we can make this a bit easier and just use our vertical angle definition. So S would be 60 degrees as well, and T would be 120 degrees. Now, let's move on to our triangle. We know that these angles must add up to 180. If we have 50 and 60, we know that's 110 degrees. Now, that means that this angle must be 70 degrees. Now, we can move on to this and say that these are congruent vertical angles, so F is 70 degrees. Now, using our supplementary definition, we know that 70 plus another angle must be 180. So we know that our angle now is 110. And this would go for G and E. Again, we can use alternate exterior angles and alternate interior angles to find our remaining angles. We know that E and K are alternate exterior angles. So K is going to be 110 degrees. We know that F and L are alternate interior angles, so we know that that's going to be 70 degrees. Now we can just use our vertical angle definition to find the rest. L and J are vertical angles, so J is going to be 70 degrees. K and I are vertical angles, so I is going to be 110 degrees. Now, these definitions are very helpful for finding angles when we don't have a protractor, but it is always important to double check your work. So we have a protractor here, and we're just going to check a couple of these to make sure we are right. Now, we are going to look for angle H first. So we just line up our protractor, and we see that that line goes up to 70 degrees. We can do the same for angle T. We just line up our protractor, and we see that that line goes up to 120 degrees.